Welcome to NEXTGames Elder Scrolls Online Dungeon Series. Today we'll be taking on Elden Hollow I on the Veteran difficulty. Now there are a total of 6 bosses in this dungeon, but fortunately only 2 pose much of a challenge, even on this difficulty. Now I'll be using Isabelle, my companion, to tank these, which normally is going to work well on 4 of the 6 bosses. Let's start going through what we'll be seeing in this dungeon. Now the first boss can be found here, and goes by the name of Akash Gra-Mal. Now, there are 3 abilities that can be used by this boss that you need to look out for. The first is a cleave attack that does a good deal of damage to anyone in front of the boss. Now, whoever is tanking should be sure to face the boss away from the group, and this damage can be easily mitigated. Also try and block it if at all possible. Now, the next ability is Whirlwind. Now, this will do AoE damage in a small circle around the boss that will continue to do damage over time. Simply step outside this small circle to get the damage to stop and for you to be able to continue to get your melee damage in. Now the last ability that you're going to see here is Jump. Now you're only going to see this if you get out of melee range of the boss, and it can do a good deal of damage, so you want to be sure to stay within melee range of the boss at all times. Now as long as you keep these things in mind, this one should go quite easily. Now after this one is defeated, you have 2 choices. The first is to continue into the dungeon to the 3rd boss. The second choice is actually to go to the other corner of this room and fight the mini second boss called Ancient Spriggan. Now Ancient Spriggan will be assisted by 3 smaller Spriggans, but AoE damage will take out all of these adds quite quickly, so they're easily dealt with. Now the main boss will only use a healing spell occasionally that you should interrupt, but other than that, she has so little health that it really should hardly make a difference. And when done, we head further into the dungeon to take on the first challenging boss of the dungeon, Chokethorn. Now Chokethorn can be found here, and he is one of the 2 challenging bosses for this dungeon. Now, the 2 main abilities that you will see used are Vine Pull and Burst. Now Vine Pull will be used anytime you are outside of melee range of this boss. He will chain pull you back into range and root you to the ground for a short period of time. Now this is obviously most simply avoided by staying close to him. Now this is complicated by the second ability of Burst, which will put a large AoE circle around the boss that will be ever expanding, and if you're in the range of it when it stops expanding, you will take massive damage, either one-shotting you or leaving you at critical health. So when you see this start to go off, you must get out of range immediately and then get right back into range to avoid being pulled back into range once it goes off. Now while these 2 abilities are being used, smaller adds will begin spawning around the room, and they will begin healing him while they are spawned. Now if they are left alive, you will normally be unable to finish off the boss due to the lack of curing that he'll be receiving, so you need to prioritize killing these extra adds as soon as they spawn. Now you can try to use ranged weapons to kill them, but this can take a good deal of time, so I normally just use a combination of ranged attacks when in melee range of the main boss, and running out to the adds to get some damage in with your abilities before being pulled back into the range of the main boss. Now it's these healing adds and the need to take them out that make this fight so challenging and lengthy. That's going to be all I'll have to go over for this boss, so go ahead and enjoy the rest of the fight, and we'll talk again at the start of boss 4. Here we are at the start of Boss 4, which can be located here in a large group of other enemies. Now you first want to try to deal with all of the added enemies with AoE abilities, while being sure to block any of the nasty attacks coming from the main boss. Now be sure to try and focus on the healing adds first, followed by ranged, and then melee adds to cut through them as efficiently as possible. Now once they are all dead, turn your focus to the main boss, who should be the only one remaining. He has 3 main attacks that you need to look out for. The first is a heavy attack that should be blocked or it will knock you down and do a good deal of damage. Now the second is lightning form, which turns him into lightning and zaps everyone in range. However, it's normally a small enough amount of damage to just cure yourself through while continuing your own damage. Now the last ability is a channeled burst attack that does a moderate amount of damage to anyone in range, but this can easily be interrupted. Now once this 4th boss is dead, you are faced with another choice. You can skip boss 5 entirely by taking this path here to the final boss, or you can take this other path out of this room to encounter boss 5 on the way to the final boss. Here we are at boss 5, Leafseether. Now this is basically just a giant Elit, and he is assisted by a minor Elit that you can normally just take out with AoE damage while you're dealing with the main boss. Now the abilities that you will see in this one are a bite attack that is a directional attack, so you want to make sure that you have your tank face them away from the group, but it only does a small amount of damage, so as long as he's followed that simple technique, there really shouldn't be much risk here. Now the next ability you'll see is Jump, where he will jump into the air and then crash down onto the tank, knocking you down to your feet if not blocked. That's why you want to be sure to block this ability to avoid being knocked down and the large amount of damage that it can do. The last ability that you will see is a Breath and Bite attack that is again directional, so you want to make sure that the tank is facing the enemy away from the group, and it can do a large amount of damage, so it's even more important on this one than it is with the original Bite attack. Other than that, this one is pretty straightforward. We will talk again at the start of the final boss, who is easily the most challenging and time-consuming of this dungeon.
Move your feet! Get moving!
Here we are at the final boss, Canonreeve Oraneth. Now there are a lot of abilities that you're going to see during this one, and you need to be ready for all of them, as many can be quite devastating. The first is going to be Frost. Now it's only a short range AoE attack around the boss, so it can be easily avoided, but the main thing this will signal is that the next attack will be the Poison Bolt attack. Now you need to try and dodge roll as this attack goes off, so you can avoid taking the good amount of damage that it would inflict. Now the next ability is going to be a stun attack that puts a small red circle on the ground under you. Now you need to be sure to avoid this circle, as it will have skeletons that come up out of the ground, and that will both root you to the ground and do a good deal of damage to you. Now at times, 4 skeleton adds will also be summoned, and these should be taken out with AoE damage while keeping your main focus on the boss. Now the main mechanic that you need to watch out for will normally follow the stun ability, and it is a blast ability that is another one of those huge growing circles around the boss, as we saw on boss 3. Now if you get caught in this, you will most often die and get one-shotted, so your main focus must be getting out of range in time every time you see this being ready. As long as you can manage this last ability, the run shouldn't be overly challenging, but do know this boss has a ton of health, so it will take a bit of time to finish this one off. That's about all I have to go over in this one. Enjoy the rest of the fight, and we'll see you next time in the Elder Scrolls Dungeon series.